Now that you've created your library, you're ready to actually start to program. So let's get started. Your program, you need to speak in a way that the program understands. You can't skip any steps or else it won't run exactly the way you want it, won't be efficiently. So the very first step is very important. You need to tell the program when to show up. So what you're going to need to do is to create events. Every one of your sprites is going to have an event. So in the events, you can see that there are several different events. For every sprite, it's going to need to have a when clicked. When clicked is basically how to start the program, when the flag is clicked. Every single one of your sprites is going to start with an event when clicked. As you've created your script, there is a sprite that does something first, very first in your entire program. That sprite is going to have an important job, and that sprite is going to start the scene in the very first scene. When you run a program in Scratch, when it stops, it doesn't reset. You have to program it to reset from the very beginning. So the very first sprite, and only that one sprite, needs to have switch the backdrop from the looks. And you'll drop that in, you'll see that there's a drop down list that will allow you to switch from scene to scene. When you first started putting in your sprites, I said don't worry where everything is. This is why. Now, this should look familiar to you. This is a grid. What do you know about this? It has an X and Y axis. There are 4 quadrants. There are negatives and there are positive. And the very center coordinate plot point is 0, 0. Why am I talking about this? The Scratch stage is the same 2-dimensional grid. So if you remember your plot points from math, you will be able to understand where your sprite is on the stage on the left. You need to know how big it is. It is 480 pixels from left to right and 360 pixels from top to bottom, which are split between negatives and positives. So you can go 180 up, 180 down, 240 right, 240 left from the origin point right in the center. You need to know where your sprite is when you start. Over on the right in the workspace area, you will see that there is a picture of your sprite and an X and Y over on the side. If you mouse around, you will see actually there are X and Y's near the stage. Those are where your mouse is, not where your sprite is. In the workspace, over on the right top corner, that's where your sprite is. There are occasions when the sprite sometimes goes outside the stage area, so those numbers are higher than that 180 or 240 for your Y and your X coordinates, so sometimes you need to bring it back in. When you're writing the script, after you have created your event, you're going to need to go into your motion, and you're going to need to tell your sprite where to go. This is where they start in the program. So you're going to need to fill in the X and Y. Third thing you're going to need to do for your sprite, how to be. You're going to need to tell it how to look. When you first start your sprite, you're going to not only tell you where, but how. And that's in your looks category. There are show and hide. And also on the bottom, you will notice that there is a set size. I told you originally, don't worry about the size. This is where you will change your size of your sprite. All of your sprites are going to need a stack. When clicked, where to go, set the size, if you're switching your costume, more on that later, and whether or not you're showing or hiding in that particular scene. So let's practice this a little bit. So now here I have my library and my stage and my backgrounds. So I'm going to start with my stage, my very first sprite is going to be my product name. So that is the one that's actually going to start my program from the beginning. I'm going to go to Event, and I'm going to go to When Clicked. I need to set the stage to the proper scene. So I'm going to go into Looks. I'm going to go to Switch Backdrop to Scene 1. And when I click the flag, it's going to switch to my blue background. Now all of my other sprites are still there. I don't want them to be there. So I'm going to go over to my product. I'm going to go to my event. When clicked, I don't want to be able to see the popcorn. So I'm going to go to my looks. I'm going to go to hide, and I'm going to attach that. Click my flag to test my program. Notice the popcorn bucket goes away. Now D and Devon are still there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this stack and I'm going to copy it to D and Devon. How I do that is I take it and drag it on top of D, and then drag it on top of Devon. And if I go now into their workspaces, you'll see that that exists in both of their workspaces. I'm going to click my flag, and now my popcorn product name is where it needs to be. I'm going to go to my product name, and I want this to be up at the top. So what I'm going to do is go to my motion. I'm going to choose my go-to. What I'm first going to do is I'm going to move it to the position I want it to go in. Now when I move it, this will auto-fill for me. And that's how I'm going to decide, okay, this is exactly where I want it to be, maybe a little over to the right, and I will attach this. Now when I go to click my flag, looks like nothing happened. Everything actually happened, but it was already set that way. But if I had switched my background, because I was doing something, now I click my flag, notice it goes back to scene 1. Why? Because I programmed it to do that. Now I'm not finished with this, and I realize there's actually more that I want to put in my scene 1. So I'm going to create a new sprite that's going to be part of my narration. I'm going to use my text tool. In your workspace over here, there is this little tiny plus sign. The little tiny plus sign is actually the center point, or where your sprite is on the board. So I am going to center everything that I need to write right on here. So I'm going to go to my text tool, go down here to my options. There's not a whole lot of options. And I'm going to write in. You are going to be required to put in all of your things from your product proposal. Your business name, your name yourself. Now your business name isn't Whams, that's mine. Notice that the text doesn't have an auto center, so I'm going to eyeball it and make it look centered. Click on my costume. When I click on my costume, it appears. Now notice it's not centered. I'm going to use my tool to move it to the center. I can put on my grid lines temporarily. Take my select tool. The select tool also allows me to move it. So I'm going to grab it, and it's going to have a center point, and I'm going to line up that center point with that little plus sign in the center. Whenever you are making a sprite, you do want to align it from the center on the costume, not what shows up over on the stage. I'm going to click on the costume, it's going to move, and it's good to go for right now. Now if I wanted to make it bigger, that's my select tool again. The font tool does not give you nearly the same amount of options as Photoshop Elements. So don't think that you're going to be able to do exactly the same things that you can do on that. So now I'm going to go back into my scripts, and I'm going to start to script this. But notice, my sprite is called Sprite 1. In the other video from before, I told you that your sprites need to have a single word name that makes sense. None of them should be called sprite. So I'm going to rename that as presents. Go into my scripts. I'm going to start with an event. When clicked, I want it to show. I'm going to go into my motion. I want it to move into the center. Now, I said one of the other things that you want to use is your set size. The size is too small. So I'm going to take my grow and my shrink tools. I'm going to click on my grow tool. I'm going to click on it until it's the size I want it to. Sometimes you have to re-click on it. You have to be right on top of one of the letters or on top of whatever it is you are growing. And with the letters, it has open spaces, so sometimes you don't get those. So the size is now set, just like with the go-to, and I'm going to set my size and attach that in my script. Back into my motion, I'm going to move this to exactly where I want. My go-to is auto-filled. And I'm good to go for right now. Now, I want my product to actually show up. At some point, your product should be shown large and featured. Now, it can be wherever you want. In the beginning, for me right now, I am not going to have it show immediately. I'm going to go to my script. I do have it hidden. Now, I want it to show up after this. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this disappear and this show up. So in the script for my intro, with my business name and my product name, I am going to use another control. I'm going to have it wait. This is where the sequencing comes in. This is where when you start to create dialogue, you're going to need to, just like in every conversation, one thing is happening, someone is waiting, and then they will speak and the other person will be waiting. You learn this in the activity 2 in the CS. So same kind of thing. So I'm going to have this wait for a second, and then I'm going to have this hide. So let's test it out. That pops away. Now, in my product, I'm going to do the opposite. So it's going to hide, and then I'm going to have it wait hidden for a second, and then in my looks, I'm going to have it show. However, it's not in the right position. It's too big. So before it shows, I'm going to need to set its size. I'm going to start with the size. So we have set size, and it's at 100%. So this one I needed to shrink. I'm going to shrink it. I think that's a good size, so it's 80%. So I'm going to have this do this before it starts to show. And I also want it to appear here. Now I have my go-to, and again, before I want it to show. So let's see what happens. So we're going to test it again. And that's my first scene. I've already put in my product name. I've already put in my business name. I've already put in my name. These are your setup blocks. So this is how you would start your first scene. But all sprites are going to need a stack of commands when you get started. The event, when clicked, where it is, how it is, this is again how it is, if you have it switching costumes, which we'll talk about later on, and whether or not it's hiding or showing.